Welcome to Outside the Lines. I'm Bob Lee. With the leadership of Oklahoma University under increasing criticism for its decision-making in the Joe Mixon assault case, today another strategic leak of information by Mixon's legal team. The criminal assault described in his own voice on tape. You will hear it. Friday, Mixon's attorneys made public the graphic videotape, the restaurant surveillance tape of the assault by Mixon on Mia Molitor, his punch, which broke 4 bones in her face and led to Mixon's 1-year suspension from the Sooner football team. A tape seen by university officials back then, but the subject of a legal battle for several subsequent years. Today, after more than 3 days of growing scrutiny on the university since that release, Mixon's attorney released the 1-hour police interrogation tape of their client from late July 2014. This from 3 days after the assault, after the incident. So with Mixon having apologized only in written statements and through his attorneys today, for the first time, in Mixon's own words, he is heard describing the events in a Norman restaurant which led him to injure the woman. This video was obtained by the Oklahoman.
I was sitting down. We just now coming from Diamond Dogs. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting down. My teammate's probably like over there somewhere. And like some guy that was with the girl, he came over there, smoked a cigarette. He probably was about where he was at. And then it didn't intentionally come in my face, but you know, I just got up. I didn't do nothing yet. I didn't say nothing. I didn't say nothing to him or her. And after
you mean
girl,
the smoke out of your face?
Yeah, the smoke out of my face. So I stood up, and I was just standing up, you know, to get out of the way of the smoke. And once I stood up, the girl came, and she intentionally came in my face and blew it in my face. I didn't say nothing to her then. I just talked to him quick, and it was like she being hella disrespectful by doing that, smoking in my face. After that, I went behind her. Then my teammates, they started getting on that line about, you know, her coming and smoking in my face, being disrespectful. And then that's when she went up to my teammates and got in Mark's face and was like, you ain't never met a bitch like me. And after that, I guess they got into it. Then, you know, she was in his face, and then while my teammates got around it. After that, the girl, I guess she got scared or what. She went up inside and she went to talk to the person that I came there with. And I guess she knew him or whatever. So when she went inside, she was talking about how we were trying to jump her. So then that's when the dude went inside and I followed the dude. Then that's when I interrupted her, and I was talking to Sooner Dave, talking about how nobody was trying to jump her. We had no problem with her. She was just being disrespectful, you know, coming smoking in my face and getting at them crazy. So after that, the gay dude, he was just like, he called me something. He was like, so then I was like, what? I was like, you got me messed up. And then I called him a and after that, the girl, she dropped her purse. That's when she came in my face, pushed me, and then my glasses came off, and then like I had like jumped at her like to watch out, and I was like, watch out. And then she came in my face. I put my head down and she swung on me. And after that, like I was so shocked because she hit me so hard. It felt like a dude hit me. And like after that, like when my face hit, it was like boom. And like my reaction was just right there.
So for the first time, we hear Joe Mixon describing. That's Roger Cossack, ESPN legal analyst, who joins us, and ESPN Big 12 reporter Jake Trotter is here as well. All right, Roger, you've seen your share of tapes of interrogations of cops and attorneys and defendants in the same room. What do you make of what was said, and also Friday's release of the surveillance tape, which shows the punch, and this release today, 4 days later?
Well, I think that the reason that Mixon's group and attorneys release this is that horrible as it is, and it is absolutely, that punch is clearly totally wrong. But I think that not seeing it, and I think at least Mixon's group believes that us seeing what happened and hearing Mixon describe what he believed happened is better than just having it left to our imagination. What we knew was that he had slugged this girl. At least he attempts in the interview to explain what happened and how it was something that happened in the heat of the moment. And I think that's why Mixon's lawyers have released this under the theory that there's no good coming out of this, but perhaps we can make this better than it really is.
The firestorm around the university, criticism of the leadership, but they move forward towards the Sugar Bowl. Jake Trotter. Jake, you've been all over this on the ground. What has the release about 3-4 hours ago of this done to the atmospherics around this story?
Yeah, Bob, one clarification
mentioned, the release of the video of the surveillance tape of the punch Friday was released by Mixon's legal team. The video today of his police interview did not actually come from Mixon's legal team, and it, to a great extent, damages the narrative that their team has put out. There's been this narrative, and they haven't directly said it, but there's been this narrative that Amelia Molitor said a racial slur to Mixon, and that Mixon responded by punching her. In his own words in that police interview, the racial slur didn't come from Molitor. It came from Molitor's friend, and then Mixon and he got into it before Molitor stood up supposedly in defense of her friend at that point. So it actually damages the narrative that Mixon's team has had for the last couple of years, that this was initiated by a racial slur that Molitor threw at Mixon.
There's also, though, since the release of the surveillance tape last week, there's been a firestorm of editorial criticism. It was released into the Friday afternoon hole, the editorial hole. But let's give you a taste of some of the editorial opinion around there. This is David Jones from PennLive.com writing, "If you can help Stoops and Castiglione and Boren," Bob Stoops, the AD Joe Castiglione, David Boren, former U.S. Senator President, make money. You can hit a woman in the face and break bones, and they'll cover for you as long as you're a five-star talent. And from Dieter Kurtenbach at Fox, it seems that as far as Stoops is concerned, winning comes first and decency comes second. And it sure seems like oftentimes with the Sooners, those two ideals oppose each other. Or perhaps Oklahoma is just a high-profile example of the way things work in college football now. Just present those as an example of some of the conversation around this. So since the release on Friday and this release today, moving forward towards the Sugar Bowl game, what are the indications? Will the administration say anything further at this point?
They're going to have to at some point. And I said this on Outside the Lines yesterday. When the video, when this first happened, the incident with Mixon, it was about Joe Mixon and how could he have done this? Why did he do it? Who is Joe Mixon? Now it's about Oklahoma and their decision to keep Mixon on the team, to only suspend him for a season, to allow him to come back and play. And he's been one of their best players ever since he stepped on the field. So there are going to be a lot of questions for the administration, not just Bob Stoops. You got to remember, Joe Castiglione and the president, as you mentioned, David Boren, were all part of this decision-making process. So they're going to have questions to answer as well, why they felt like that Mixon deserved a second chance at Oklahoma after this incident.
Quickly, Roger, if the school moved to impose further discipline on Mixon, would he have a good case in court, double jeopardy?
Yeah, I think he absolutely would. It's not exactly with double jeopardy, but he's already been given the punishment for the full event, and they knew exactly what happened. You know, we may be seeing this tape for the first time, but they certainly saw it 2 years ago. So to increase his punishment just because they are coming under criticism today would be wrong and unfair, and I don't think it would work.
All right, Roger Cossack, Jake Trotter, thanks so much. In this year in sports where we have seen Baylor University involved in their scandal, Ezekiel Elliott under investigation, the Minnesota scandal, 5 elite schools. Let's talk about the issue of women in college sports. And let's turn to, you had a quick look at Brenda Tracy, who was a survivor of an alleged sexual assault by University of Oregon football players in 1998. She's an activist in this area. She's met with Baylor head coach Jim Grobe and addressed his players earlier this year. Jessica Luther reported early and effectively on the Baylor scandal. Her book, Unsportsmanlike Conduct, College Football and the Politics of Rape. And Marcus Spears, you see on the SEC Network, and he played collegiately at LSU and 9 seasons in the National Football League. And it's good to have you all here today. Let me ask you, Brenda, what you make of what you saw Friday, what you heard today, in the bigger context of all the other incidents I've mentioned, Baylor, the Elliott investigation, Minnesota, these elite schools. What's going on?
Well, it kind of feels like a war against women and kind of this standoff between violence against women and then also just college sports and football in general. It's really frustrating, and I get tired of just seeing case after case after case of this violence, and I really am hoping that the NCAA or these individual college programs will step up and start instituting some zero-tolerance policies of violence. It's out of control. It's completely out of control.
Marcus, let me ask you about that. We all know what happened at Baylor. We read, if you've not read the 82-page Minnesota report, I'm not addressed to you, I'm sure you have. It's horrifying. You've got the 5 elite schools where you've had these social communications by these men. perhaps it's more than sports, but it's being exemplified from sports and by sports. What do you think of this?
You know, the bottom line is that these players have a responsibility, and that responsibility, first and foremost, is to respect other individuals, and knowing that they'll be under a microscope by any move that's made or any disservice that's done to any person more than the next. That's number one. Number two for me, though, is just common decency and growing into a human being and an adult and understanding that these type of things can't ever be justified, no matter what. So I think a lot of this, and I've talked about this with guys around football. I've talked about this with athletes. There needs to be an ongoing conversation. We can't have a red alert every time we see or hear something like this go down.
And who's going to be a part of that conversation? I know Brenda mentioned the NCAA, but you've got even these non-revenue sports at elite schools that aren't even in Division I, where the language alone is horrifying.
Yeah, Bob, but I honestly believe this, and I liken it to when you get drafted in the NFL and you go to a rookie combine for 5 days and they try to cram in 5 days of what you're not supposed to do and how to watch out for certain situations. This has to be ongoing. This has to be something like was mentioned before. It needs to be a zero tolerance policy. I guarantee you'll see a drop. If you tell a guy, if you strike a woman, if you strike anybody in a horrific way like we saw in the Mixon tape, you won't have a chance to play football.
All right, Marcus, in a word, how would you describe Oklahoma's decision several years ago when the leadership watched that tape, saw that blow that knocked the woman unconscious and put him out for a year, but did not disassociate him from the program? How would you describe that decision?
I think the decision is coming back to haunt him, and I think it's one that. And look, I've never been in this situation, so I don't know what the discussion is in those rooms. And also, with that being said, I do have a sense of, does a guy pay the rest of his life for something like this? Like, that comes into my mind. I can't help but to think about that. But at the same time, I think when you implement policies, when you have certain things in place, you cut and dry and you define the line. And there is a line that needs to be defined when it comes to sexual assault, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to abuse. There needs to be a line drawn in the sand, and we can't. The reason why we keep having these discussions, Bob, is because there is a gray area, and the gray area needs to be gone. It needs to be, this is what happens when you commit an act this way, and then no one has a leg to stand on. It's this way, and it's not going to go any other way. So yeah. I think that's the conversation that needs to be had, but also the education element of it.
All right, these discussions happen, Jessica Luther, because there's a videotape. In several cases, there's a digital trail in the case of some of these misogynistic communications at the schools. You reported early on the Baylor scandal. What's the big picture here?
I think for me, and really piggybacking off of what Marcus said, someone in charge needs to do something about this. And for me, I talk a lot about what the role of coaches, right? We have an entire TV Hollywood genre about how influential these coaches are on these players, and they need to be the ones leading the way on preventative education around consent, healthy relationships, dating violence. I just had an op-ed in ESPN magazine about this exact thing, because I really think it's important for coaches to step up here. And one of the things I think a lot about with the Minnesota kids when they came forward and they read their statement, he was using terms like the unjust Title IX investigation, due process, judiciary duty. Who are the adults in this case teaching them to use these phrases and are not teaching them about consent, what a healthy relationship looks like? I mean, what are the conversations here, and who's having them, and where are the coaches in all of this?
One of the conversations that took place, I'm going to play a piece of tape for you, Brenda Tracy, from the interrogation, and it involves Kevin Finley, the attorney for Joe Mixon, discussing, saying in so many words, we all know about the, quote, drunk chick in college, which may be the phrase that stands out from this. Let's give a listen to that from.
There is a size difference. Now, she was wearing heels because by all accounts they were kind of looking close to eye to eye. I know that doesn't change anything, yes. Is he bigger and stronger? Absolutely. Obviously our position is you're right, words cannot start a fight.
And that goes both ways.
And she initiated the physical confrontation. So, I understand different degrees of force. The way I believe the law looks at it is that, once she hits him, had he pulled out a gun or a knife, then he has escalated force. But I don't think the law requires him to. I think he's allowed to return a punch with a punch.
So, Brenda Tracy, there we heard the description from Kevin Finley of a punch for a punch. There's another piece of sound which we'll play momentarily when I speak with Joe Mixon's attorney when he talks about the, quote, drunk chick in college. But the tenor of the conversation around this, what do you draw from that?
That it's victim blaming language, and we're doing this thing of, boys will be boys. And as I speak out about this subject, I've been getting all this rhetoric in return about, well, if a girl's going to put herself in a man's place, she should be expected to be treated like a man. And my question is, why is it that the quote-unquote definition of a man's place is violence? Why is it about disrespect? And why is it about a lack of restraint and lack of discipline and control? Why isn't the definition of a man's place about nonviolence and about respect and about restraint and control? This video could have gone very differently if Joe Mixon had removed himself from the situation and reported her. Maybe then it would have been that she pushed him, she hit him, and it was assault by her onto him. But to return with that punch, which the lawyer said, it wasn't a gun or a knife, but a punch can be fatal also. So I disagree with that, and I think there's a lot of victim blaming going on here, and I think it's unfair. We're getting this message that, well, women, men will be men, boys will be boys, men are violent, they rape, they beat women, and so if you put yourself in a position, then that's your fault, and you should have expected it. And I disagree with that. I think that isn't speaking to the good men in this country who would never put themselves in that position
We've
or
seen
hit
it
a
so
woman
much out there
or
in
sexually assault a woman.
college and professional sports this year. Thank you all for joining us today. Brenda Tracy, Jessica Luther, Marcus Spears, appreciate your time. And stand by when we return. Joe Mixon's attorney will join me live.